Hi, everybody. My name is Natalie Yeadon. I'm the CEO and co-founder with Impetus Digital. Impetus Digital has built some of the best-in-class asynchronous and synchronous virtual collaboration and communication tools for life science companies that we've worked with for the last 12 years across the globe. We've helped companies do everything from virtualize their advisory boards meetings, investigator groups, doing protocol development and discussing decentralized trials. We've been working with people in medical education and even large corporate events. We do this all through the Impetus Insight platform. We believe that everything starts with a really great conversation. And to make these conversations not only happen once, but to be able to build and sustain them over time using our collaboration tools. So we feel that this is a great way to get started. So this is what we do with our Insight platform using Insight touchpoints or Insight events. And so we also feel that through these fireside discussions, we can work with some of these digital entrepreneurs, these provocateurs, people who are on the leading edge of discovery and innovation in healthcare, so that we can all work to positively and collectively disrupt healthcare. So I'm really pleased to have one of these really great thought leaders in a really innovative company in the clinical trial space. And this is Munther Baara. He is actually the Vice President of Product Strategy and Innovation at EDETEK. He has over 25 years of experience in leading the development of a numerous number of clinical systems and business solutions. He has held roles in increased seniority in biotechnology and in some of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, leading global teams and technology implementations. Munther's experience has been focusing on innovation, trends, and emerging technologies in support of the paradigm shift in the execution of clinical trials. Munther has most recently been the head of new clinical paradigm at Pfizer, where he led and/or contributed to the transformative technological breakthroughs that has happened at that company. And of course, they've been in the news quite a bit lately. Munther has also worked on clinical patient journey. This is a mobile and sensor technology. He's worked in blockchain, returning data to patients, something called shared investigator platform. He's worked on clinical aggregation layers, eSource. This is like an industry pioneering electronic health record data transfer technology, as well as has worked on Transcelerate biopharma projects. So the list is kind of endless. In 2018, Munther was crowned one of the top 20 innovators in clinical trial advancements by CenterWatch. Welcome, Munther. So happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for unbelievable description. Appreciate it.
Well, it is an unbelievable description, and you've done so many incredible things, and obviously landing you at the forefront of some really exciting work and technologies, an exciting company in clinical trials. But maybe you can just start off with, tell us a little bit about how you traverse this really interesting trajectory in your career to get you to land where you are today.
It was an interesting journey. And you know, what's amazing about it, it's the people that I worked with that really contributed the most to it. It's amazing. But by training, I am a computer scientist, basically, worked on programming, setting up platforms and what have you. 5 years before I left to Pfizer to work at EDETEK, I started a new group, and I had a group called New Clinical Paradigm, and partnered with my partner in crime, Craig Lipset, I'm sure you know. So that kind of like to work on, and we were working before, but we're more focused on really innovation and disruption on what is this model is going to look like. And actually, one of the early things that we've done is returning data to patients. And it was one of its kind at the time. I think companies took almost 4 years to get the hang of it because patients didn't know what happened to them at the end of the study. So we created something called Pfizer Link that allow you to really get the results of the study, understand whether the drug worked or not. That was the basic complaint we get from patients. Like, I participated in your clinical trial, but I didn't know what happened. It was successful, was not, et cetera, et cetera. On top of that, Blue Button, something called Blue Button by the VA, and the White House at back in then was fresh and new, and we jumped on it to return data to patients using that standard. From there, we basically joined the journey of the patients. One of the things I strive with is these meetings with the patients to understand their pain and what they're going through, and then develop solutions around their journey, and caregivers, because a lot of times people also forget it's not only patients, but also caregivers that are basically intertwined and really share the same pain. We can talk about their journey because we, like lupus patients and oncology patients, when you sit them and understand and empathize and try to develop solutions really to support them. On top of that, I think what expanded my horizon is working with a lot of the nonprofit organizations, such as Translate, was a fantastic opportunity to be able to work with the brains of 20 other pharmas, basically all in one room, a meeting with investigators and patients, study coordinators, and regulators, trying to understand everybody's point of view, and where the science was not, leaving science aside, when things were not competitive and repeatable, this is where we tried to develop solutions, such as the shared investigator platform. Actually worked with NIH and clinicaltrial.gov on the interface of that website, and we actually developed wireframes based on the feedback from the patients and investigator study coordinators. Write the protocol and the website for the patients, not for the scientists. That's the key theme was there. And I can go on and on. So happy to jump in any direction, basically.
That's fantastic. I want to spend a couple of minutes on the fantastic company that let's be really honest, the world has pivoted, especially around clinical trials, since COVID-19. A large percentage of pharmaceutical and biotech and medical device companies' trials unfortunately hit a brick wall really rapidly, and a lot of trials really abruptly stopped. Since then, a lot of people have been able to get back on track, and there's been all kinds of great success stories with it. So maybe you can kind of paint the picture a little bit about what your company at EDETEK was doing prior to COVID-19, and what sorts of changes, pivots, or accelerations have happened with the company in terms of what you provide as products and services in regards to clinical trials.
This is a very interesting question. All right, let me just, what got me interested in EDETEK is really the platform and the solution. So EDETEK platform is an end-to-end solution that allow you to connect, collect, and consume data in real-time basis, as well as conform it to industry standards. When I talk about industry standards, I'm talking about STDM and ADAM. This is typically standards used for submission to the FDA or for interim analysis to communicate with the regulators or other stakeholders to see if the study is working, anything they want to report on the safety and what have you, right? So that's our platform. It's a single platform, allow you to do all these things in an integrated, seamless solution, basically, fast. And I emphasize the word fast because it worked to our advantage with COVID studies. We run more than 20 COVID studies, almost with the exception of J&J. That's the only studies we probably did not work on it at different levels. So from the platform and then also from the service department. We also have the service department within our EDETEK that provides basically study design, statistical analysis and reporting and submissions. We participated more than 1,500 studies. We did more than 25 submissions in the last really 2 years, basically. So we're very engaged and we understand the problem. But the beauty of the system, because if you look to all the leaders in recent announcements, the key thing to them is proactive decision-making. Data coming in real time, be able to view it and be able to act on it, to be able to intervene. And the fact our platform actually is built on the AWS platform, from the get-go, we have unlimited power. We have the ability, it's like batteries. You know, when you watch your batteries goes from green to yellow to red, our platform has an automatic manifestation. So if it goes to yellow, additional servers comes in, additional CPUs, additional storage, it's all automatic and configured. And actually that worked to our advantage when we had thousands and millions of data points coming through our system that need to be validated, aggregated, and transformed to its destinations.
So this is really fascinating and fantastic timing, obviously, because the company existed before this pandemic emerged, and you were able to have people quickly pivot, modify, accelerate, and modify what they're doing with their protocols and all kinds of things. We're going to get into that in a moment. But just for the audience listening to, because again, this happened very rapidly, is a lot of people are still in the mindset of the traditional, more legacy methods in which clinical trials have been conducted. So can you actually just explain at a high level what sort of the process was in terms of protocol development, and then really more of the delivery, if you will, of the study, how it was managed with investigators, and what makes EDETEK so different as a new process or a new system in that old, more traditional version of how clinical trials were done?
Yeah, so I think you got to think about what just happened. We almost jumped like 5 to 10 years ahead of ourselves, right? Because you deal with this skeptical that says this will never work. You know, my study, my optimized process from the 20th century always worked and will continue to work, right? And then you get the person who's sitting on the side watching you to see if this new process is going to work, right? And you get the innovators ones who really want to change and really expedite the approval and getting drugs sooner to the patients to improve the quality of life, and potentially, like with COVID, saving their lives, right? So that's the mentality you're dealing with across the board. Now, how our platform helped as we worked with our clients in designing some of the studies, etc., but also we had the speed of the ability to be able to aggregate data from at different levels, at the study, at the site, and at the patient. And I say that the patients will fill their ePro data, right? It goes to the vendor. In the past, it used to go into a silo island, you know, and then when the clinician basically in a week or two gets that data, they'll look at it, or maybe they wait until the interim analysis. And if one of the things, and I'm sure you heard it probably from other speakers as well, you know, a typical project manager will say, my study for 6 months was green. Overnight, I went from green to yellow to red. How did that happen? You know, help me to make the invisible visible for me. And that's where we shine. So when we put our solutions with them and we work in the study protocols, etc., so we added more direct to patients, right? So we collect data directly from the patients. That's number one. That we've seen a lot of that basically. And the fact that we can aggregate that data in real time, it doesn't matter how much of that data, and bring it to life in the consume part to visualize it. That actually greatly helped. And also, it's the ability for the sponsor to intervene. So when they see the data come in and compare it against the other modalities, now they can understand what's happening, what's going on at the site, what's going on with the patient. Potentially, you could have an amendment or change the approach and learn from what worked and did not work. And this is usually, before it used to take months before that happened. We've seen studies that went from, you know, day one of the protocol within the same year, in less than 262 days from, you know, the inception of the protocol all the way to the emergency approval, basically, if I use it for approved.
So if we're looking at this traditional way, people and sponsors would start off with a specific study protocol. A lot of times there were very specific endpoints. The data was being collected by, you know, CROs, clinical research organizations, or by physicians themselves, and it went into a system, and there was a lag time and a process and a methodology, at which time suddenly everybody saw something, or there was an issue or not, and then, you know, you're saying, you know, several months later, then there's an intervention.
Yeah.
So what we're sort of seeing just from the get-go is a complete turnaround on how the speed, but also in the way that trials are being conducted. So more specifically, it all comes down to data, right, and how data is being collected, and really determining, before we even look at the data, is what data do we want to collect. So let's just actually stop for a few minutes and think about protocols and the traditional way that clinical trial protocols were developed. Many times the endpoints may be considered not as resilient because you're requiring physical intervention and meetings and having blood work and all those sorts of things done. What has EDETEK done in this ecosystem around decentralized trials or virtual clinical trials around protocol development and the input you've had on how a protocol is written, what are the endpoints, and how do you insert resiliency in those?
Yeah, I think you just hit home on one of the major complexity, which is complex protocols, right? In the primary, secondary, and exploratory endpoints, over the years, we start to collect more and more data. And sometimes, you ask the question, to answer, actually, I saw it somewhere, I don't know, I don't have the link for it, so that they said only 7% of the data is used for submission and approval of drugs. The other 93 is in support of the data. And it kind of like speaks to the heart of your statement right here. So our statisticians and protocol writers usually interact with some of the sponsors that, a different sponsor, I just have to say, like, we work differently, right? So we came with different services. So I don't want to just make a general statement. We did it with every sponsor we worked with, just to be careful here. But our statisticians and our medical writers work directly with these teams to the study teams to basically ask the question, do we really need this data point? Is it really needed? Do we, what is exactly the primary endpoint? So let's stay focused on this and let's collect less data in support of the vaccination. That was one of the key questions. Now, also, I think over the years, can I just take you back like a few years back? When we worked on some of the mobile solutions and the sensors, whether it's a mobile, we always been faced that, oh my God, this is going to impact my timelines. It's going to slow me. Leave me alone. Go make sure it is tested and it works. Then come back. And even when you come back, even like when we introduced e-consent, for example, right? So people were always saying, oh my God, this is another line budget item in my study. So that was not there. That added to this. So people kind of like stayed away basically from these things. And we tried them, but we tried them and not at the scale. And this is, I think COVID came in, I call it the new digital CIO, because that helped expedite the digital journey and strategy. As I said, like almost 5 to 10 years ahead of its time, whether within health or within the education system. There's like, you never thought your kid's gonna stay home and people will not go to university and do their education online. There's no way that would happen. And it happened and it expedited that, right? So now with that, we took all these things that we tried and we put them at scale and it worked. And rather than slowing the study, it helped expedite the study. So now we also helped as part of the design to say, move some of these the tests and visits electronically. Now we have telehealth, so the patient can meet with the physician, as well as we could utilize mobile devices and sensors as part of the study to capture temperature and other endpoints, basically as part of the study. So all in all, so we moved and shifted things around, and people were receptive of that because they didn't have a choice, basically, but to work with it.
When would people start talking about changing the traditional endpoints and methodologies? There's oftentimes a resistance to change. We've built systems and infrastructure and everything around us, the organizations, the teams, the sponsors, all these things, specific methodologies. And then we're asking people to kind of modify this really, really quickly. What sorts of levels of resistance or aversion to change or objections have come up in this transition to moving towards more resilient endpoints or changing the methodologies and in trial protocols and data collection?
This is an interesting question. I think if it wasn't for COVID, my answer would be slightly different than what I'm going to give you right now. So people had to work from home. People cannot interact with each other. People are dying. So now the need is completely different, right? And it came directly from the top down of management to say, we have to start the studies. It has to go super fast, etc. That basically was the driver, I think, to and some studies. The other pain point, which actually kind of like COVID exposed us in the other studies, like how do you ship medicine? How the studies that you're currently conducting, how would the patients get the medicine? They cannot go to the site. People with chronic diseases, they're afraid of the coronavirus. They're not going to go to the site. So how are you going to get the medicine to them, right? So that's kind of like introduce a new variable into the formula. And now the COVID studies need to happen fast, basically, as well. So with that, and the mandate that came from the top down, that we need to go fast, a lot of things run in parallel. Rather than compromising in the processes and the quality, I don't think anybody compromised in that. All what they've done a lot of things in parallel and proactively, basically, we're looking for that information. Now, I would say this. In my experience, if you go talk to any of the sponsors, their systems are optimized for internal use. The external interaction are not optimized for that. So with the new modalities that would get added, the telemedicine and what have you, those are hard. And I feel like a lot of people, it was based on heroic efforts from individuals within each of those companies in order to save people's lives, and worked so hard, hours and hours. And I call it, it's almost like duct taping data together in order to make sense out of the speed. And then they start working on solutions to see data in real-time basis. One of the things that we've done in our system, like refreshing data almost 6 times daily for one of the large studies. That's kind of like a huge unheard of, because people are waiting a week or two to look at data. They're looking at the data in real time multiple times to make decisions, basically.
So one of the key things that we're talking here really about is a rapid change in the technologies that everybody is using in order for you to collect this, this large amount of data that's going to be available in a way that never was before.
Yeah.
So it really honestly opened the eyes for everybody to see that not only does it need to come from clinicians or CROs, but it's actually going to come directly from the patient.
Yep.
So I'm just curious about your thoughts and EDETEK's capabilities to assist sponsors and other stakeholders involved in the ecosystem around the data collection, specifically how are you interoperationalizing, data coming from EDC, various central labs, the wearable devices that patients are getting. So what are you doing around interoperability?
Great question. So one of the things that we've done early on, let me just give you an example, so kind of like put it in perspective. There is also electronic health records. That data are collected in electronic health records. So I was talking with one of the large hospital network. He said, we committed initially for 5 patients in a COVID study, and we managed to enroll 900 patients. Now, let me put this in perspective. So in chronic disease, like if a patient has a cancer over 3 years, you'll end up probably with, maybe 100, 150 concurrent medications that they're on. In the COVID study, he said, well, guess what happened? The patients are on a specific medication. They're on, off. There's a different medication. Everything is, they're trying different things and what have you. You almost end up with hundreds of records. Now imagine what they had to do to transcribe that data from their electronic health record to the EDC system. So now where we shine is basically we create those adapters. In the Society for Clinical Data Management, a year ago, they published a paper and said 70% of the data are now coming electronically, basically. And I'm talking about, the depth of the data, right? Not the width, right? So because a lot of the labs, the echo and what have you. So now imagine if that hospital was using our system that I spoke to, that we actually extract the data directly from their electronic health record into the ADC system. And actually our vision to eliminate the ADC system goes right into the STDM module there's no reason to go to EDC, because if we can automate the data extraction, why go to the EDC system? But that's a vision. We're working with some of the sponsors as well, on the FIRE group and what have you. Hopefully we'll get there one day, sooner than later. But that's the speed I'm talking about, because the quality of the data and transcribing and what have you. So, just hopefully that gives you a good flavor of that, basically.
It's a beautiful thing, because as we all know, physicians, investigators, everybody, we're all basically habit-forming individuals. We, James, I always refer to the James Clear book, Atomic Habits, is that when we do these little 1% increments every day, it becomes a dopamine drip, they become automatic behaviors, and then it flows. The biggest thing is really around habit activation. How do you get these kinds of things integrated into people's natural workflows so things actually happen when they should be happening? So the fact that this can seamlessly integrate from these health records, these electronic health records, without any intervention is absolutely huge. Can you speak to the same piece? We talk about patient-reported outcomes. This is another data entry point coming directly from patients, their wearables, but a lot of times there's manual entries into journal systems and other sorts of things. What can you say about the seamless flow of these data from these wearables, I don't know, 24-hour glucose monitors or what have you, or even what we call ambient biometrics? So it seamlessly flows without even anybody knowing it's coming in. What does EDETEK have to say about that data flow from patients?
So I call it electricity and water. All right. So think about this. When you walk to your building or to your house, do you ever think you have electricity or water? Right? You just turn the switch on and electricity is in, and the light is on. Water is in. I can go and drink the water, wash the dishes. Right? I don't think about this. So this is where we basically in our platform. We set up the first two C's, we call them connect and collect. We create a library. We have a large library of connectors that allow us to connect to different vendors' data, which is validated and compliant, basically. So when you start the study, if that adapter is in place, you don't have to worry about the thing. You basically add it. You might have some, little or minimum configuration that you need based on the study that you're running. So now data are flowing from the source, right? And the data are coming in, and you set it up. It works, magic, basically. I love to call it magic, because in reality, you hooked up the pipelines into the building, and if your building has the right size of the pipeline, then the connection happens and the data start flowing. And I think data is the fuel, right? If we manage to get data in real-time basis, and now we're connecting data either from the site or from the patient or from the electronic health record, it doesn't matter, right? Because now we're using standards and interoperability, like for example, working with HL7 and FIRE. This is one of I call it FIRE is on fire. Basically, it's really getting adopted more and more, and not only in the US but globally. We have to keep that in mind as well. We need to have global solutions, because a lot of the studies we run are global, basically. So now data comes in. There's one more thing I want to bring up. When I was at Pfizer, one of the things we called the flexible location and the convenience for the patient. So part of this, we were talking about the visits, right? And doing the virtual visits and have the flexibility. Do I really need to visit the site and determine if there's things, and the visiting nurses can withdraw the blood, or I can go to the local hospital next door to me, so I don't have to drive 2 hours basically to get to the hospital just to withdraw the blood, because I have my job. I'm working, right? That impacts the quality of my life. If I have to take the day off, and if I had to do it every other week, I might lose my job, right? And if I have a caregiver has to take me there, that's another problem. So that's the flexibility of the location. But then there's another thing the patient told us, like, don't give me another device. Why give me another device? I'm at work, and if I start opening that, somebody's going to start asking questions. I don't want to talk about my personal issues in front of other people. So this is when we've done studies around bring your own device. So now, and actually, it was utilized during the COVID-19, so that the app, the patient-reported outcome was downloaded to the mobile device, right? And people accepting the response. Actually, we've done a study with multiple partners, over 200 patients, and we've shown the fact that you have different resolutions that did not impact the way they answered the questions, basically, in there. Yeah.
That's fascinating. And it's so great to see this opportunity that we've never seen before of patients we just don't talk about patient centricity kind of from the side of our mouth anymore. It is literally integrated in the effectiveness of trial protocols and execution and completion, that they have to be part of this equation now. So we have this unprecedented opportunity for really thinking through what the hybrid trial means, with giving patients the ultimate choice. Are they going to do it on location, or they want to actually do this at another part of the world, or are they going to be doing some semblance of something in between? So I'm just curious about the implementation. We talked a little bit about wearables. We talked a little bit about, even using tools like ambient biometrics, where things are flowing, where you don't even know the information is getting passed on to the data lake. But just curious as well, when we talk about the traditional ways of managing and monitoring with like drug lab results and drawing blood, is your thoughts and EDETEK's contribution to things like liquid biopsies, and even things like Bluetooth enabled monitoring tools, is how are these all being integrated into this greater ecosystem?
Yeah. You just reminded me, because one of the things that we looked at is the inconvenience for the patient, right, and the barriers for patients participating in clinical trials. We back in the days, actually, it was 4 years ago, we worked with the MIT lab with Dina Katabi. I don't know if you ever seen her research. So within the router, the Wi-Fi router, it will passively capture basically your heart rate and other information about you. So they don't even have to wear the device, because some patients were allergic, to the ActiWatch and other devices that they have to wear for a long time, etc. So that was actually another innovation that happened, which was very impressive. And I think I hear that now some of the Wi-Fi providers are offering some of these services, basically. Sorry, I think I missed the question. Say one more time.
No, I was actually just wondering about the patients, being able to monitor them through the trials with other sorts of tools, such as, using things like Bluetooth enabled monitoring tools, or even things like, instead of drawing blood, liquid biopsies, so things that they're actually physically doing themselves.
Yeah. So, I mean, the beauty of this, what I just described to you, this is happening through the Wi-Fi that gets immediately transmitted basically to us. They have the capability basically to receive that data in real-time basis. Actually, we have alerts as well. So if data are not coming in, it alerts the site or the study coordinator to connect to the patient, say for some reason we did not receive your data, etc. So to figure out what's going on. So this is the beauty of us being on, like, in the AWS platform, because it enables us to really connect to the latest technology, basically. And not only that, which is more important, connecting is okay, but being able to act on it, right? That's another thing, right? So when you work with patients and at their convenience and be able to receive that data, but you also need to be able to act on it. And that's actually, it plays into the patient retention. Let me explain what I mean. So, okay, so what's the point of us collecting all the data, bring it to the sponsor? And I like to use the analogy, you have a warehouse where you store a lot of brown boxes that has a lot of papers in it. And in order for you to find something, it takes you weeks and days before you get there. So, and this is the differentiator now, right? We have the ability in real-time basis, as the data comes in, to understand what is this data and cross other modalities. So I can look at their EPO data, their wearable data, and then compare it to what's compared in the electronic health record system, compare it to the lab results, and then be able to intervene in real time and alert the clinicians or the investigator to say, this data doesn't align, or there's something seriously happening. You can put alerts in the liver toxicity if this is a phase 1 early study and you're endangering the life of the patient. So you can immediately act on it and basically alert right away so they can stop the medicine and what have you. So I think real time. There's also another paradigm shift and a different mindset at the sponsor narrative that need to happen as well. Because before, that data used to take a long time before it comes in, and it comes in different systems. You didn't have the urgency to really look at the data. It will take you a lot of time. And the whole idea that the paradigm shift we're trying to do is to help the different stakeholders focus on the science rather than on the tracking. Did it happen? It did not happen. So we proactively monitor that data, bring it to life on the in the consumption data visualization tool, where the study level looking for safety signals, efficacy, and what have you. Bring all that to life in real-time basis and visually. I'll tell you something that we've done. We created something called the patient profile summary, right? So that gives you like a longitudinal view of the patient, whether it's adverse events, concurrent medication, medical history, vital signs, all shown in one single view visually with colors. And then at any point you see weird numbers or anomalies, you can basically drill to that area, see what's happening, and then to be able to proactively to communicate with others. One of the things we did, and that goes back to the work that I've done with the Patient Data Access Initiative, we want to return data to patients. So one of the things that we've done, that view can be available both for the investigator and the patient as well. So if the investigator want to have the conversation with the patient, that lively they can, live the view, they can see the data together. Because one of the things when we had the working group, the investigators, study coordinators, and patients, and the investigator was always concerned, am I going to see what the patient is seeing? And the patient is saying, how can I interpret the data that you're sharing with me? So kind of like we provide two ways of returning data to patients. I love this concept. I think it's empowering, and it creates trust basically between the sponsors, the sites, and the patients. So you can return it in in a machine readable format, or visually appealing both to the patient, to the site, and the sponsor as well.
You've actually painted you've painted a really great picture there, Munther, about all of the advantages to the various stakeholders, the patient, the investigator, and the sponsor. So I was actually just curious. I mean, a sponsor is going to be coming in here. They, may or may not have been delving into some of these clinical trials, decentralized or hybrid, or, some version of it. And they're sort of doing a cost evaluation and sort of looking at the traditional ways that they've been doing it and the new way. And maybe somebody may say, well, we're not really saving any money, or we are or not. How does one actually repackage this and looking at this in a much more holistic manner? So maybe a little bit more on the upfront and getting the technology, the systems, and the set up and the methodologies, but is there some longer term impact on return on investment based on the speed to trial development, check in and fail fast and pivot or reprioritize? So how does a company like EDETEK reframe the costs so that sponsors can actually see what the actual benefits will be to them in the long run?
Yeah. This is a very, very good question. We struggle always with this. The first time you do anything is going to be expensive, right? So if you're doing your first, probably the DCT study, it's not going to cut cost probably for you, because this is your first early investment. But in the long run, of course it will, right? Because now you basically putting this infrastructure actually, there's three things plays into this: technology, processes, and culture, that you have to work on that triangle in order really to be effective. Because there's a mindset in the culture that you have to tackle and address, and people have to believe in, but also your processes. You need to adjust. Your SOP says you can review data in 3 weeks. Now you need to review data maybe within 3 days and what have you. And then how the data moves around in real time, etc. But then from the technology investment, actually, I think our platform, such platform, help expedite the execution of the clinical trial and unveil any problems early on in the study to allow us to take actions. Let me explain. So if you don't see that data collectively in real-time basis coming in, and that's usually the case. So if you, for some reason, enrolled the wrong, you did something wrong early on, whether it was they did not meet the inclusion/exclusion criteria, the patients, or you misunderstood the procedure of how or any of the processes or the diagnosis, that might not be covered right away. It might be uncovered two months later, but it's probably too late because you already potentially enrolled the patients that didn't need to be enrolled and they don't meet the criteria. And now you have the wrong population in there. By you being up in the front, connected and seeing that data, and you have that mindset to view, you can immediately give the feedback back to the site, to the patient and the different stakeholders, within the system.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing and well put. Obviously, artificial intelligence is taking a greater and grander role in all of the technologies that we are implementing in healthcare, let alone in clinical trials. What would you say that artificial intelligence has done to date?
Yeah.
And how is this going to make clinical trials smarter, faster, better in the future?
Awesome. Excellent. I love the question. It's the new kid in the block. It feels like it's the new buzzword. Everybody loves to talk about AI and machine learning, right? And that's true probably 10 years ago. It was just more a buzzword. Today, it's no longer just a buzzword. With the advancement of technology and the computing power and the horsepower that we have in our hands, machine learning is actually helping us a ton. We are working in quite few number of models. One of the things we're working on, because we look at historical data. So one of the challenges in clinical research, it's hard for them to look at historical data, actually even to know what studies they ran in the past and how to reuse some of the data to basically use it as an input to the design. So one of the things we're using machine learning to feed that historical studies and then give it as an output in terms how potentially could help in the design of the new clinical trials. Now, while the study is running, and I think this is impressive, we're working in a couple of models where I just cannot believe it's true, basically. I will share a secret with you, that we can predict adverse events, we can predict serious adverse event, and we can actually even potentially predict the efficacy endpoints as well. And but of course, you need some historical data within the same indication. You feed data as it comes in, basically while the study is running, and you run it through the model, and then that produces basically some of that predictions. Those, I think, is going to help a ton. That's going to help us to optimize our efforts, to proactively take proactive steps with the sites and the patients, for the quality of their life, as well as the clinicians and the scientists, basically, to show them the power of modeling and predictive analytics that we can bring to life, basically, rather than after the fact when the study is over, basically.
Very fascinating.
I think you're gonna see a huge advancement in that area. A lot of probably new companies, startups are going to shine in this area with these models. We've seen a huge effort across the board, whether internally within pharma, all the vendors that they work with them, basically in that area.
Absolutely. So kind of bringing this back to the patient again and what the future is going to be looking like. As we bring clinical trials to the actual user, the consumer of healthcare, if you will, the digital citizen, can you see ourselves in a day where patients or people with specific health conditions may eventually crowdsource their own clinical trials, finding out other people online who have similar situations, conditions, and then putting it out there, and then scientists from across the globe conglomerating in their own sort of maybe finite start and stop time organization to help solve that issue? Is that going to be the clinical trial of the future?
I think so. I think it's happening. I know, like in California, I've seen a couple of people trying to hack some of the medicines that based on some of the patents and create their own basically medicine, what have you. But let me take a step back and make it practical, right? Let's talk about blockchain for a second. Okay, that's one of my favorite topics. So one of the things that what's important and ethically important is around permissions, right? So don't use, you want to make sure when somebody touch your data, use your data information about it, about you, actually you're aware of it and they have your permission and they only use it within your permission. One of the things that bothers me in one conversation, somebody was saying, well, healthcare providers can share your information. I said, well, I didn't give my consent. Well, they said, by you signing, to go for the visit or for the health insurance to pay for it, you already signed, basically agreed to share your data in an anonymized way, basically. It was like, that was my first shock 7 years ago when I learned that. It was like, oh, I'm on top of my world, I control my data. And I know data is being sold in the black market as well, but I don't get anything back from that also as a result. But if you think about the blockchain, if one of the concepts, there's 2 white papers actually we published 2 years ago, one on reimagining the digital patient and one on blockchain. And one of them is what we call life health record. So the day you're born, you get a drop of blood, basically, that analyzes your data, goes into the blockchain, and that's your baseline. And as you grow, all the data gets aggregated in there. Now, one of the things you can do in there, and this is especially important for the rare disease patients, because they are hard to find and hard to know each other. As part of the blockchain, I can actually, in an anonymized way, I can basically declare I'm interested to participate in a clinical trial. I'm interested in people who has this conditions. And when the system find them, it's up to them if they want to declare each other to talk to each other or not, basically. Another area where actually we struggle, and I think COVID helped that to basically educate people what is clinical trials and why it's done and how it's done. It's unbelievable. Now everybody talks about clinical trials. In the past, that was a major problem for us, really, to educate people what is that process, and people are not out there to get them. Really, they want to get that medicine sooner to the patients. But if you're part of the blockchain, you could raise your hand and say, I want to participate in clinical trials. And so in an anonymized way, based on your condition, you run against the clinical trial registry, find all the studies that are currently actively recruiting, and if the conditions matches, you get an invitation. And if you want to participate, you raise your hand and want to participate. With that, I think now the opportunities, scientists, people can find each other and could potentially create their future studies. It does not have, it's almost pulling the rug from beneath the regulators and pharmas and what have you, and changing the business model. It's like the way Uber changed the business model. It's like Airbnb. You talk to the Marriott, I think 2 years ago, they said, oh, it's going to take us a year to expand for another 10,000 hotels or 10,000 rooms across the globe. You talk to Airbnb and say, okay, in an hour, we will expand to the rest of the globe, basically.
Absolutely.
So that's where all this comes from. I think it's doable. I think it's happening. And that's in my mind, there's no going back. After we change now and advance 5 to 10 years, the skeptical one sees that the results right now. And now it's changing that mindset to say, I am going to join the train. I'm going to be on it. This is going to help me to basically get my study done and done faster with higher quality.
Yeah, it's a very exciting and fascinating, if not scary, future, because again, when we talk about disruption, there's systems are going to go away and new systems creep in, and COVID has been a great example. We talk about the K economy, and some companies and some systems and industries skyrocket and others diminish like a sunset. And this is really the concept around progress and change, and sometimes it's very difficult to swallow. With all of that said, we've also seen a kaleidoscope and a confluence of changes happening in the fintech space. One of them consider this idea of non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. And the idea is kind of building on your idea around blockchain. And and cryptocurrencies and what have you. But the idea of potentially looking at this from a broad scope is that we could technically own the internet, meaning people can put their health data into this blockchain, add these elements of social contracts in them, and be able to monetize their data whenever an investigator or a company or a sponsor is reviewing or utilizing their data for all kinds of good: population health management, predictive health analytics. What did you say about the future of things like non-fungible tokens or NFTs and the monetization, or more specifically, the democratization, so that people can actually make money on their health data?
Yeah, this is the new marketplace, basically. And actually, I speak about this in that white paper as well. Listen, people has three choices. They either want to get back and they get paid for their data, or they want to donate their data for future research, or use that money actually to support future research as well. And we as individuals should have the opportunity to decide whether I want to do it for free, I want to donate, or I want money or tokens back for it. Basically, this is my data. This is my decision. It should not be done to me. It should done with me, with my consent. Basically, that's how I see it. Basically. Yeah.
It's going to be a really wonderful world in the future of all of these discussions around inclusivity and disclosure and consent and privacy and all kinds of things. And we'll get into that in a second. But I'm also just curious, we talk a lot about everything being focused and centralized around the patient, which it should be, because this is really ultimately what healthcare is about.
Yeah.
But do you also see potentially a future, companies like EDETEK, where basically you're a repository of data, you're amalgamating it, matching it up against standards and protocols and business rules, if you will, and then serving it back up in these dashboards for people to analyze and review and determine predictions on, will a drug work or not, or should we pivot or make the protocol change? But can we see that maybe one day it may not actually have to happen in patients? There's a lot of work being done right now on computer algorithms, clinical trials in situ or in silico, and other sorts of methodologies. Is there a day where EDETEK is really just going to be, merging with data sources that are not even human?
The sky is the limit, right? I think he can do a lot of things, but there's the first question I think is very important, which goes to the patient before I comment on this. It has to be done by the patient with their permission and their consent, right? That's key. And so ethically, we have to keep that in mind, basically, right? Because my dad, your dad, my mom, your mom is a patient. I am a patient and you're a patient, and you don't want anybody to touch your data, share your data without you consenting to that. Now, I think, can I give it a different spin, basically? So if you think about what's happening right now, it's the collaboration across the board, basically, to say, yeah, like for us, our platform, we have tools, but actually it's plug and play. So if our sponsor says, I don't like your tool, I want to use somebody else's tool, we allow you to plug in somebody else's tool. So we're not, we're not basically cornering ourselves. That's number one. Number two, other opportunities such as, think about master protocol. Why not collaborating all of us based on the data we have to create a master protocol that feed all that data, optimize the data, real world data, right? Creating the arms basically based on that data to be able to analyze the data and optimize for the different arms that can participate in the study. Use real world data, real world evidence, all data that comes in, and in real time simulate and model all this information. And it can be done in a cell as well. Absolutely. I mean, we've seen this is happening. So technology is no longer an issue, in all honesty. It's basically, I think it's a mindset and it's a paradigm shift for people to basically start thinking, now we have all the power. Technology can help us. Technology can work for us. And then how can we fit all this together and now use the great brains and minds to come up with these great ideas with open source innovation, put it out there. It's like Kaggle, right? When you want to do some analysis, you put the data set, you create the competition, and people come up with the best models, and then you just apply it. Absolutely. I think
It's
this
a
is the future.
beautiful thing, and I love the flexibility and what the endless opportunities are going to be. Thinking about some of this as well too is, I guess one of the questions comes down to is we have to be concerned in this day and age. We're hearing about a lot of cybersecurity issues. We've heard recently about SolarWinds. We've heard recently about the hack that just happened with Microsoft, and some other things that were going on as well too. Across the board just recently, what they're calling, basically, hacks that are going on. What are people saying around this new world of data being out there, and it could happen to anybody? How do we manage all of these security concerns of the future?
Yeah, we don't lower our guards, right? I think everything that we design from the ground up must take security and privacy. I'll actually add one more, privacy as well, into consideration. If you do it at the heart of the architecture, you have a better chance to secure and comply with privacy. I think a lot of times you've seen these hacks. And I would say sometimes even it comes from within internally. You'll see a lot of people like looking at code, understanding where is the weak point in order for them to hack. I think security, when data is collected, it's secure, encrypted, in transit is secure and encrypted. When it's stored, it's secure and encrypted. That's a must. You cannot compromise in this. You cannot leave the open text data, basically, because you don't know, somebody taps into your laptop, etc., that you downloaded a data set and people jump on it and get into it. That's a must. And I think organizations must invest into security officers to basically who are expert on encryption and how the internet. And I know some other companies like to get hackers basically as SME to basically get in and see if they can hack into the system, figure some weak points of the architecture to make sure you close any loopholes basically within the architecture. It's a continuing battle that we have to stay up to date, all of us, understand the latest technology, being aware of any loopholes in the operating system and the web, etc. And as I said, the data must stay encrypted and secure through the 3 layers I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of discussions as well on edge computing versus centralized data lakes, and I'm sure the discussion will go on. One last question, I guess, just to sort of finish this off. So many key learnings around COVID-19, trials, acceleration, but I think more importantly is a lot of naysayers around science in general, and the predictability and the believability of science has been put to the test. And I'm really just kind of curious about what your predictions are of the future of clinical trials. We are so used to the standardized that, clinical trials are done a certain way. There's a stop time, there's an output, it's published, and it becomes like a stagnant truth for a while. We've been introduced to a lot of things around real world evidence, patient registries, almost like an ongoing analysis of information. And it's a completely new paradigm for the general public to incorporate. And there's a certain level of unbelievability of considering the fact that data can continue to change. So in some ways, it's getting people to point issues, if you will, with the idea of science. What do you have to say around the future of clinical trials and what COVID-19 is teaching us?
Well, I would say this, that COVID has changed us. Moved us, as I said earlier, like 5 to 10 years ahead of our digital journey, and also has basically enabled us to think differently and think out of the box. People are coming together to come up with solutions like, the Decentralized Trial Research Alliance, the DTRA, over like almost 2 months after establishment, almost 100 different organizations are part of it. It's amazing, the stuff, and people are coming together to change. Now, I think the future is different. I think the future is data, data scientist. I think the future is going to be with machine learning and AI basically contributing to the simulation and the modeling, and potentially maybe use more of the labs and real world evidence and cycle arms as well. That basically helps to minimize the number of participants that needed in order to prove the medicine works or not. And I think the future is going to be where potentially the data movements can be controlled. Just going back to your security, is creating that digital platform. My data doesn't have to move. You have a pointer to that data. And then if I allow I can actually donate my data back to be part of that research. That will help probably get us resolutions and results sooner than later. And as well as probably with direct interaction with regulators. We saw an outstanding collaboration between pharma and regulators enabled us to do things that were unheard of in the past. They allowed us to basically control, of course, compliant, with quality, etc. But they allowed us to do that. So that basically says that we need to collaborate, the conversation need to happen, and we need to be listening basically in order to change our industry. But there's no going back. I think the status quo has changed, and we're forging forward, basically.
Beautiful. This is a fantastic way to end the conversation. We could probably go on for hours because it is truly very stimulating, the ideas, the opportunities, and the innovations that lie ahead. So for anybody, I want to thank everybody for listening. If anybody's interested in connecting with Munther and their company, EDETEK, we will be leaving their connections, links, etc., for you to check them out. They have a fantastic cloud-based conform platform that's great, all-in-one informatics, clinical trials platform, and accompanying services. So if you're interested in looking at how you can do some of this, either a full clinical trial, hybrid, or some sort of a decentralized version, please connect, and we'll leave that in the show notes. We also encourage you to check out impetusdigital.com. If you enjoy these conversations, or you're in this process of rethinking your protocols, how you're going to be developing, changing them, modifying, looking at doing some of these things and changing your infrastructure methodologies, this is exactly what we do at Impetus. We help you work with your stakeholders. We also actually run patient advisory boards, investigator sessions, and be able to have these continuous ongoing conversations to be able to continue to work with them. So please check out impetusdigital.com. We would appreciate if you can like and subscribe so other people can find this information as well. And we want to thank everybody for attending today. Thank you, Munther, for an excellent conversation. And we want to wish everybody a great day ahead.